Uzbekistan, a country with thousands of years of history, containing all the magic of the Silk Road, as well as numerous Oriental fairy tales, with traditional culture, Islamic history and fascinating desert landscapes. Our journey begins in Tashkent, the city of Amir Timur, the riding general who established a dynasty. A city on the ancient Silk Road, famous in both Orient and Occident, and having inspired both scholars and poets, plus craftsmen and artists. Markets are held as in former times. Only their locations have changed. A modern domed building now houses a bazaar. Trade is in the people's blood, and to them quality means fresh and faultless goods. The Hasti Imam complex is impressive, even with its tourism. Around the tomb of the first Imam of Tashkent, a madrasa, a religious school, was built, and the city's largest mosque. Although having died in 926 AD, in 1541, a somewhat modest-looking mausoleum was built to commemorate Imam al-Kafol Shoshi. The buildings of the colonial district have been built as in prehistoric times and are inhabited by extended families. Modern Tashkent contains wide boulevards and plenty of lush greenery. White stalks that symbolize fertility crown the large entrance arcades to the place of independence. Blossoming flower beds surround various memorials. Artists busy painting inhabit the Broadway. And the grandiose Opera House surprises, as does the huge Tashkent Palace Hotel. In 1953, a Russian Orthodox church was built in neoclassical style, an unmistakable sign of the religious influences of modern times. A small amusement park represents an element of change. It's a relaxing atmosphere and no more signs of the huge earthquake that devastated the city in 1966. Solely a monument. A giant television tower in the middle of a water park indicates progress, an oasis that has become a metropolis. The Silk Road had many different routes, one of which led through the Fergana Valley. Where magnificent weddings are celebrated today, the palace of the Khan of Kokand recalls an era full of splendor and wealth. In the 10th century, this was a resting place on an international trade route that made the Khan and his Khanate extremely powerful. The Friday Mosque was at the heart of the Muslim historical center, and with its 80 wooden columns, could accommodate several thousand worshippers under the Iwan. There is a small museum. Khan Nabuta Beg had this madrasa built. Within Khan's cemetery, next to the regent's final resting place, were those of various of the city's prominent citizens and their wives. The mausoleum of Omar Khan and his family attracts many visitors. Margalan is the city of silk. The cocoons of silkworms are boiled in large pots while their threads are decoiled. They're then dyed and woven into fabric. On the caravan routes, it was not only trade, but also culture that was exchanged. Even the smallest mosques shine out with beauty. The production of bread became an art form, and each baker created his own stamp as a unique, distinctive mark. Its production developed with the flowering of the trade route. Rishtan, too, is situated in the Fergana Valley. The city of potters is one of the oldest and most important centers of ceramics in Central Asia. Porcelain was once manufactured here, and kaolin did not exist, only aluminium oxide. Conversion to Islam took place later and benefited the city. The valley was fertile and blessed with a good supply of water, and the horses that were bred here were popular merchandise along the Silk Road. Fergana is the region's administrative center. Russian colonial buildings have transformed the cityscape. And a monument commemorates a great astronomer who invented the nilometer. While visiting the amusement park, one almost forgets the myths of the historical trade route. And that in 1877, German explorer Ferdinand von Richthofen came up with the term Great Silk Road. Samarkand, Pearl of the Orient. The ancient Samarkand became integrated within the Persian Empire, was later conquered by Alexander the Great, and in the 14th century became the center of the world empire of Amir Timur. The city of saints, paradise of the East, was one of the world's oldest and most beautiful cities. The central Registan Square is flanked by three mighty madrasas. Samarkand was the center of one of the oldest forms of state in Middle Asia and was located on the Silk Road. Newly introduced Timurid style further enriched the architecture. Colored mosaics of astounding luminosity compete with glazed relief ceramics whose ornamentation is composed of arabesques, font characters, and geometrical shapes. Tirakari Madrasa is the third madrasa of the Registan. The symbols depicted on this splendid monument portal testify to the self-confidence of the land's powerful ruler. Where once students were taught, today souvenirs are offered for sale. The madrasa was not only a university but also a Friday mosque. Its melon-shaped domes are covered with pious words and citations. Amir Timur progressed from being a mercenary to a brilliant commander and founder of a world empire. Catwalks with modern-styled folklore costumes are very popular in Samarkand and are popular for their teas and cakes. The Rukabad Mausoleum was constructed for Sufi Sheikh Sagatshi under Timur's rule. Nearby is Guri Amir, the grave of the prince. The mausoleum of the once powerful Amir Timur and some of his closest relatives and associates, with 9 cenotaphs of precious stone. The Bibi Khani Mosque became Timur's most prestigious project, the largest and most magnificent Friday mosque of the entire empire, named after his main wife. Opposite is the Bibi Khani Mausoleum, a brick building with a blue glazed dome. According to tradition, it contains the tombs of Timur's favorite wife, her mother, and 3 nieces. Although the main room is decorated with fine murals and gilt Kufi reliefs, it has not been possible to identify the exact occupants of the tombs. Samarkand Bazaar now has a new, modern appearance, and the variety of goods on offer has never been better. With fresh fruit, vegetables, honey and cheese. Uzbekistan is well known for its hospitality and cuisine. Pilaf is prepared with roast meat, rice, beets, onions and spices. The Shahi Zinda necropolis, a pilgrimage destination, existed long before Timur. Numerous mausoleums line the narrow streets. The interior of the necropolis is quite remarkable. According to legend, it contains the tomb of Kusam ibn Abbas, a cousin of Prophet Muhammad. Even today, the complex consists of 20 buildings, most of which date back to the 14th century. A place of faith and peace, and also Majolica art at its best. Some complexes of the necropolis are particularly popular pilgrimage destinations. It's tantamount to being an outdoor museum of Timurid architecture, with influences that came to Samarkand from Timur's various conquests. Higher up the necropolis, the Hazrat Hizir Mosque rises up from the slopes of Afrasiab Hill, visited by the pilgrims of pre-Islamic times. More than 1,000 years old, it features Samarkand ethnic architecture. To commemorate the Islamic saint, eternal pilgrim, and patron of travelers. There's also a fountain and tower. The Afrasiab Museum contains archaeological finds from that time up to the Arab conquest, and mosaics, carpets, ceramics, coins and wall paintings from the Sogdian period. On Afrasyob Hill, there was once Marakanda, capital of Sogdiana, a prosperous city that was famous in the entire Near and Middle East, until it was eventually destroyed in the Mongol invasions of the 13th century. In the north, a hill borders the Sayab River Valley, a sacred source of life. Situated on a slope lies the tomb of Daniel. It's believed that Amir Timur brought the bones of the prophet here from his Persian campaign. In front of the tomb house is an old tree, full of the wishes of the faithful. Back in the city is the El Morosi Theatre. Here special emphasis is placed on choreography and authentic historic costumes. Here each dramatic story becomes a great adventure. On the outskirts, Ulagbeg had an observatory built on a hill. Its remains are still spectacular and recall the obsession Amir Timur's wise nephew had with astronomy. Ulagbeg was able to attract famous astronomers to its university, with whom he published the Book of Fixed Stars. Samarkand is a tale of breathtaking beauty. On the outskirts, paper is still produced in the traditional way. The bark of branches peeled, cooked, and then mashed to a pulp. The pulp is ladled through sieves, rolled dry, and then printed or written on as paper. Shahrisabz was the birthplace of the great Timur, the riding general who established a dynasty. But only the ruins of the huge entrance portal to the White Palace have been preserved. The size of these buildings has exceeded those in its nearby capital Samarkand. In a semi-nomadic warrior society such as Timuridis, it was customary to have several cities of similar rank. The common translation, White Palace, is actually misleading because it was actually sky blue. Amir Timur began as a leader of a group of adventurers and succeeded in forming an empire of unbelievable cruelty. The Darat Tilawar complex comprises the burial site of Timur's father, a madrasa, and the Kok Gumbaz Mosque. Within the mosque, the father of Ulagbeg is also buried. The main portal of the large domed building faces east. The wall and ceiling paintings inside the Kok Gumbaz Mosque contain well-preserved floral motifs of Chinese influence. The mihrab is decorated accordingly, and geometric and epigraphic decorations frame it discreetly. With colourful tile decorations in which highly fired colours glow on a white background. remains of a large bare palace wall cover an ornate burial site. Deep below, in a vault that was discovered by chance, is the tomb that Amir Timur had built for himself, but was never used as he was buried in Samarkand. Mystical characters explained much to those who were aware of them. In a corner of the burial site, a 27-meter-high undecorated dome rises above the Jahangir Mausoleum. From here, an old wooden gate leads to the Mosque of Holy Hazrati Imam, who came from Baghdad or Kashi. The summer and winter mosques are still used today, and a peaceful atmosphere can be felt everywhere. The Silk Road led through deserts, and caravanserais such as Rabot-e Malik were the only resting places on the road between oasis towns, for both man and beast. Here, a water reservoir was worth more than all the gold in the world. This dates from the time of Karakhanids and belonged to the caravanserai. Further west, the caravans reached the oasis city of Bukhara, God's blessed city on the border of Kizilkum Desert. In the Middle Ages, Bukhara was one of the most important religious and economic centers of the Islamic world. Labi Haus, a large water basin, is, along with several irrigation canals, fed by the Sarafshan River. In ancient times, Bukhara belonged to Sogdian and took advantage of the location on the Silk Road. It was a city of poetry, myths and legends. With 350 mosques and more than 100 madrasas. On the outskirts of the ancient town of Chor Minor is the Four Minarets Madrasa. It was built in 1807 by a wealthy Turkmen. All sorts of conventional crafts have been handed down and are still used today. Bukharan rag dolls continue to be manufactured and offered for sale. Returning to the center, there's a synagogue. In the middle of the 19th century, 500 Jews lived here. Beneath the domes of ancient bazaars, trade still continues today. The oldest surviving Magoki Atori Mosque is located on the site of what was originally a place of worship for the moon god Sin, and later a Zoroastrian fire temple. Due to its central location on the Silk Road, in pre-Islamic times, Bukhara was an important center of trade. All sorts of goods were sold here. A single building is a reminder of the great astronomer Ulugh Beg, the homonymous madrasa whose first creation most likely appeared in 1417. And opposite is the magnificent Abid al-Aziz Khan Madrasa. Where commercial routes met, a dome was built over the crossing. Here, jewellery was produced as many of the people who lived here were wealthy. The splendid Polkalion complex is even now a notable city landmark. It contains the Mi-i-Arab Madrasa that is still used as a religious institution, and also the famous Kalion Minar minaret. The Friday Mosque can accommodate 10,000 worshippers and was built in the early 16th century. Following the foundation of the Arab Caliphate in the 7th century, Islam was established, and the Ark Citadel became the castle of the Emir of Bukhara, where he and his confidants resided. In the Middle Ages, the citadel was a complete city, with a palace, mosques, government buildings, warehouses, a prison, and a public gathering place. The emirs were regarded as prodigal, addicted to both pomp and cruelty, until the last one was forced to flee from Russian rule. A small museum contains the throne of the last emir. The residential area outside the old town enjoyed much prosperity. To show off its wealth, the Baland Mosque was built according to Timurid design. Chashma Ayub is a respected pilgrimage destination. When this area was desert, its inhabitants begged God for water. Hiob appeared, banging a stick on the ground, and consequently, a fountain miraculously filled with water. The greatest scholars, poets, and thinkers lived in Bukhara. Including one of the most famous founders of Sufism, who was both born and laid to rest here. Bahauddin Naqshbandi, for whom this holy place of pilgrimage in Bukhara was built during its construction period of 5 centuries. He became a sheikh and also one of the spiritual teachers of the later Great Timur. In the free space between the buildings, there are water basins. Pilgrims come here from far and wide. The motto of the Sufi Brotherhood was, "The way to God is in mutual relationship with Him and not in hermitage." The pre-Mongolian mausoleum of the Samanid rulers is an example of Samanid brick architecture and also the oldest mausoleum in Central Asia. To the west of the old town is the large Khoras Bakia necropolis, burial place of Abu Bakr and his 3 brothers, the Sayyids, descendants of the Prophet. On the northern outskirts is the Sitarai Mohi Hossa Summer Palace of the last Emir of Bukhara. He spent less and less time in the Ark and preferred to relax here in the magnificent ambience of the palace. Here he combined both Bukharian and European tradition. The spacious park also included the Emir's harem. Until the very end, he craved in vain for the eldest daughter of the Tsar. The The water basin in front of the main palace makes it appear even larger. The rooms are now used as a museum for tapestries and embroidery. The fairy tale lives on. Weaving and the knotting of silk carpets originated in the yurts of the nomads and continues right up to the present day. The Silk Road travels through the Kizil Desert and along the Amu Darya River. Finally, we reach Ergank. Its location on the largest irrigation canal in the country helped to create a green city. And its diligent rulers made certain of its independence and prosperity. Close by, only desert. The back of beyond. Construction work in the middle of the desert. Bricks of clay and sand. Within the spurs of the Red Sand or Kizil Kum Desert, the remains of many desert fortresses are still to be found today. First we visit Kizil Kaya, the Red Fortress. A rectangular castle with walls up to 16 meters high. Here its external walls are being rebuilt with essentially the same materials that were used originally, creating a very sturdy structure that produces remarkable stability. Three kilometers east of here is the Toprak Kara fortress. It resembles a fortified town and was built on a 9-meter-high artificial elevation. Its impressive dimensions of 350 by 500 meters provided 2,500 people with long-term shelter. On the highest point, an artificial hill, was a palace and temple district that is visible within the remains of the foundation walls. It's believed that this desert castle was built in the 1st century AD as a temporary residential town for the Shah of Khwarezm. The wild west of Uzbekistan is a wonderful region of deserts, with just a few yurt camps for overnight accommodation. Ayaz Kala is the most important of the desert fortresses. Actually, there are 3 fortifications, of which the highest is the largest. Measuring 150 by 180 meters, the castle is up to 10 meters high and has 2-meter thick walls. Directly within the city's ring wall was a second wall with an arch covering the space between. Panoramic views provided the castle with much security. Kizkara emerges from the middle of the flat, featureless desert. Almost mystically, the final sharp fragments of the castle's former defensive towers emerge from the ground, which consists mainly of gravel and is covered with low saxol bushes that defy the desert's strong winds with their deep-reaching roots. In former times, the Amu Darya River flowed more to the east, and there were large expanses of fertile alluvial soil with numerous fortified settlements that dated back to pre-Islamic times. The region was defended by around 50 desert fortresses or qalas. Kogoshin Kala is also of huge proportions. The qalas were the fortresses of the independent feudal lords of that time. In antiquity, the two main lifelines of Central Asia met here, water and the Silk Road. Both had to be protected and defended, so huge walls were built, with loopholes out of which archers could shoot their arrows. Koykiril Kala is referred to as the Mysterious Fortress, a circular building 90 meters in diameter. Several concentric ring walls frame numerous domed rooms. These structures contain 2 floors. Today, herds of goats move across the external walls, which were once, it's believed, a royal burial site. However, such places also had to be defended. Therefore, a gallery with loopholes was built for the archers. Huge walls protect the earliest, but also the largest fortress complex of Big Guldasun. Apart from the fortified towers at the front and the 15-meter-high external walls, nothing else remains. What we can see today is the superstructure of the original construction that dates back from the 7th to the 8th century. In the 13th century, this fortress, as well as many others, fell victim to the Mongol hordes. Armed with bows and arrows, the nomadic horsemen flew across the steppes, destroying everything in their path. This is all that remains of those days. But what is left helps us to appreciate and understand the former greatness of the mighty desert castles. Only salt lakes, such as the Kalajik Salt Lake, are reminiscent of the once fertile marsh. Also, the Kalajik Kala was a huge loam fortress that protected this area and its inhabitants. An approximately 100 by 200 meter wide site, surrounded by high loam walls and built for the protection of thousands of people. They could flee here if attacks from aggressors took place. Their lord let them enter the desert fortress protected by his soldiers. Also, the merchants and travelers of the Silk Road found refuge here in times of emergency. We're approaching the final destination of this journey and visit the summer palace Shodrahovli in the village of Sajat, which was frequently used by the Khans of Siva. It's a 4-story tower house whose floors are connected with a wooden staircase, each one with an open terrace. The whole building is built of mud bricks, the walls covered with plaster and adorned with carved wooden pillars and terrace railings. Typical of Khwarezm and suitable for the summer heat of the region. The summer palace is surrounded by gardens and fields. At last we reach the oasis city of Khiva, the 8th wonder of the world. One of the greatest centers of ancient Khwarezm, land of the sun. It was here that mathematician Muhammad, who discovered algebra, once lived. An oriental city on the ancient Silk Road, in which its greatest minaret, Khalta Minar, remains unfinished. It was destined to become the city's highest minaret, but due to the early death of the Khan, it was never completed. Kokhna Ark, the fortress of the Khan, is situated within the city walls. The condemned had to wait at its entrance for their execution. The Ark became a city within a city, with various reception courtyards and an elevated circular podium for the Khan's yurt. Even the small throne hall has been preserved, its wooden throne covered with fine silver leaf. Adjacent is the harem's courtyard. And the small hidden rooms of craftsmen. Of the castle's former towers, only a bastion of pure clay and wood has survived. From here, the enormity of the city walls that surrounded Khiva can be seen. Opposite the fort is one of the city's largest madrasas, whose construction was ordered by the Khwarezmian Khan Muhammad Rahim. Tightrope acrobatics that first originated in Khiva are performed here even today. The History Museum contains costume jewelry, clothing and old photographs of the city's strongmen. The area of the inner city measures around 30 hectares, and its buildings lie close to the city wall. A mighty wall that is up to 10 meters high and 8 meters thick. The mighty North Gate and 3 further gates in each cardinal direction are the entrances to the fortified historic center, the Idshankala. Both walls and gates provided the city's residents and their guests with good protection. The minaret and Friday Mosque were built upon the foundations of the city's earliest 10th century buildings. An archaic mosque design with a low hall whose flat roof is supported by 212 columns. Some of the wooden pillars come from an ancient mosque of the neighboring town of Kas, which was washed away by devastating floods. Some columns contain Kufi fonts. A uniquely atmospheric place. The art of carving classic wooden pillars is still applied in Siva today. With much time, skill and care. Beyond the mosque is the ancient mausoleum of Jewish Sheikh Said Alawuddin and his guard. Unlike the Pahlavan Mahmud mausoleum, this one was originally built in modest form to commemorate the famous 14th century poet. And from the 19th century came the necropolis of the reigning Khan dynasty of Kungrad. It's become a much-visited pilgrimage site. The new mausoleum now contains an ancient tomb and Hanukkah, with its high double domes, is quite remarkable. Following tradition, men of faith were buried in the city wall, guarding their city even in death. Almost 1,500 years of Oriental culture are hidden within the intriguing, winding streets of this fine oasis city. Outside the southern gate, the fortress walls contain semicircular towers. And near the eastern gate, numerous domes indicate bathhouses. The well-preserved eastern gate is always a hive of activity, as the Grand Bazaar is located just outside the city wall. Formerly, the entrances to the city were well guarded and provided the population with good protection. Various craftsmen offer their services in this area. Among one of the city's madrasas, Kutlag Muradinok, is one of the oldest, and the courtyard's fountain is still in use. A small white mosque acts as a connecting link to the nearby Arakuri Khan Madrasa. He had this magnificent madrasa built alongside a large caravanserai. The merchants were impressed. Merchandise is still traded here. Toshovli, the stone yard, was the main palace of Olokuli Khan, a complex with several courtyards of various sizes. The Mehman Khona was reserved for official receptions with numerous columns and majolica walls. The living and sleeping area of the Khan looked rather cramped in comparison to the large courtyard and rooms of the harem. The elevated section of the Khan's yurt fills the small courtyard, whose walls and iwan are decorated with majolica tiles. power and progress are depicted here, and from these a unique style of architecture developed. Despite its varied history, the mysterious city of Khiva has preserved the exoticism of ancient times and continues to be a traditional Islamic oasis city. Uzbekistan has always been at the intersection of major trade and cultural routes, and a border between Asia and Europe, between nomads and the Western world. Exoticism mixed with all the magic of the 1001 Nights.